what we are moving towards next, which I see it's very critical, as well as the government is recognizing it as a threat, is data privacy. How do we make people the users of the technology and not the victims of the technology? I have been reading about blockchain. Probably one of the things that really concerns me, or I have not really been able to wrap my head around, is who is really governing it, right?
Powered by Fluid, the world's first Web3 bank
We're
alternative.
back with another episode of Tech on Top. My name is Jessica Walker, and today we're diving into the tech powerhouse that is Google and where the industry of the internet is heading and how you, the consumer, can be a part of it. Joining me to help drive this conversation is Aishwarya Srinivasan, who is a data scientist at Google Cloud. Before we go any further, I would like to thank the sponsors of today's video, Fluid Finance. For those of you that are in the world of crypto or Web3, this is the easiest and cheapest way to on and off ramp into the world of crypto. You can sync directly from your bank account to your Web3 wallet in just moments. The link is in the description box below, so make sure you check it out.
Powered by Fluid, the world's first crypto-friendly bank alternative.
So Aishwarya, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you so much, Jess, for having me here.
Absolute pleasure, and such an interesting background. I was diving into your LinkedIn, one of the LinkedIn top voices for AI and data, also working with Google Cloud as a data scientist. So there is so much that we can discuss today, and I think I want to dive straight in and just pick your brains a little bit when it comes to some of the big buzzwords that we've heard so far this year when it comes to machine learning and some of the kind of industries that will really be adapting into. How do you see the future of machine learning and big data in the next 12 to 15 months?
So I feel machine learning or AI is used interchangeably, but technically it's quite different. I'm not going to dig deeper into that. You can probably read deeper into what's the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's more technical details. But if I'm going to talk about what does the future look like, right? I think we're already there, because when you pick up your phone, when you have your smartwatch, when you have your smart refrigerator, everything is using AI in some form or the other. Just the term artificial intelligence just means how do you make a computer or a machine or a system make decisions in an automated fashion. That's the simplest way of defining artificial intelligence. So the smallest of devices that we have, be it Nest, be it any of the technology that we're using every single day, contains all of these models. But what we are moving towards next, which I see it's very critical and organizations are soon recognizing it as a threat, as well as the government is recognizing it as a threat, is data privacy. That is where we are going to be diving really deep into how do we make people the users of the technology and not the victims of the technology, or not really the products of these organizations. So that's where I see the next technology wave going by.
So it's very exciting, but there's also some element of risk and responsibility that organizations have as well.
Yeah.
Now, you are speaking today, you are a data scientist at Google, but we do like to make clear that these are your views today, not the views of Google. And diving a little bit into kind of these big household tech names. So we saw Microsoft was actually one of the first big organizations to invest in AI. Google came around 8 years after. Along your journey, you must have seen and been in the room for some really groundbreaking conversations, and I want to know what stood out for you along your journey.
So far, again, what I have observed with Google is they have a lot of amazing internal tools. They have a lot of these amazing internal technologies which was not publicly available for a longer time. All the algorithms that Google search was using, right? Since the very beginning, the Google search is completely powered by AI. Some form of AI. It might not be as matured as it is today, but since the beginning, it was using some kind of AI. The difference that I see now is happening is they are now trying to create these products which are more accessible to the users. So for example, your Google Maps that you're using, it's trying to optimize every time you're traveling to some place and getting you the best routes, trying to tell you how the traffic looks like, etc. All that is using AI. All that is using complex computations to tell you what's going to be your estimated time of arrival, what's the faster route, how much traffic you can see, what's the density of the traffic you can see, etc. So all these tools are now being available to the users. But earlier it was sort of black boxed. Earlier it was something that people used to think that, hey, I just use this particular tool and my problems are solved, but they didn't really know what the algorithm behind it is and what it is using. So now I feel like they're more wrapping up those things into hands of the users in terms of Google Cloud AI services, right? Like, so that it's democratizing people to now use these technology in their own solutions. So now Google, what they're doing is they're creating the products and saying, hey, if you're an organization and you don't want to hire your in-house data scientists, you don't want to create that very large team who are building in-house solutions, you can use Google AI services and you can use these toolkits to build solutions very, very faster. So that's where they are going from, like having in-house solutions to something that can be used by everybody and like having it in a more democratized fashion.
And I think that's one of the things that we discussed. We were at a conference together yesterday, and one of the kind of recurring themes that came up on stage was data is the gold dust of this generation. And it really is. Ownership of your own data is such a powerful tool, using your data in a way that's beneficial for you, but also for the companies that you're working with as a user, is really going to democratize how we navigate through the next digital era. Yeah. So what would you say for people that are watching that keep hearing the words, your data, you should own your data is a real power play for you, and they don't really know what that means, they don't really know how to navigate that or optimize that? What would you say?
So I feel the basic understanding of data access is really important for anybody. Even somebody like my mother, I tell her that you need to really understand what are the access rights that you're giving to the app if you're downloading a particular app. Because if you're downloading a streaming application and it is somehow accessing your audio, that doesn't sound right. Like, it shouldn't be accessing your audio. It doesn't really mean anything, because if you're just streaming some videos to yourself, it doesn't make sense for them to record your audio or like access your audio sensors, right? So that's one of the things that we need to be aware, and that's where I try to like bring in topics, and like I try to create these conference sessions which are somewhat technical, but at the other time I also try to address folks who are non-technical, who are users of these technology, that they understand what they're signing up for. I feel that education part is the very first and foremost thing, that the users need to be educated and in a more non-technical, literal manner, that they understand what they are looking for. And I feel a lot of governmental policies have enabled this, GDPR being the first one. They have really, really scrutinized organizations to make sure that they are informing the customers, informing the users on what data is being captured. They're giving them the right to be forgotten. So like if they feel that their data should not be kept by the organizations anymore, they can request that their data gets deleted. They can request for what all applications is their data being used for, etc. So GDPR or like CCPA are some of the regulations that are coming up, and there are of course more that's in the process, and they're trying to make this process easier for the users and make it more of a fair play, and make sure that the organizations don't really use any kind of information in an ill manner.
Mm-hmm. And that must be quite challenging as well for some organizations that are working with AI, and how to navigate between kind of the new information that you're getting in and making sure that it's accurate and it's being used in a correct manner. Is it the situation where, as the ways that we analyze data and the ways that we integrate AI, as that evolves, also how we use them as a corporate organization, how that evolves as well, is there a kind of challenge of constantly trying to keep up with the two? Is it a bit of a catch-22 situation, or is there other challenges that you identify with just the dependency that organizations now have on data, and also the AI metrics that come with the data that's being used?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great question. So one of the parts that really tackles this is data governance. So every organization is now realizing that they need to have frameworks using which that can govern data, in terms of how do they collect data, how do they process data. If they are using data from people or the users from different parts of the world, they are going to fall under very different governance policies. So how do they make sure that they are complying to all of these things? How do they make sure that they're doing it in an automated fashion throughout the pipeline? How do they make sure that they're using the right parts of the data? How do they make sure that they are processing the data in the right manner? And this entire pipeline for data governance that then fuels into model building is what organizations are realizing is really important. One of the bottlenecks, as you were asking about any kind of challenges, is the infrastructure costs, right? There are a lot of costs associated with. In theory, yes, this is how it should be done. But if you want to really implement a certain framework, you need people. You need the very, very defined processes. You need toolkits. You need applications that really enable you to do that. And all of this has to be done in a scalable manner. So all the costs and time associated with it is the bottleneck that the organizations are trying to navigate through.
Awesome. And now when we talk about disruptors as well, we're always looking ahead for that next big innovator, something that might shake up the industry. And Web3 for a lot of people that are in the kind of the blockchain space has been one word that we thought, oh, wow, this is interesting because this is a decentralization and democratization of data and also some of the big kind of sites that we are used to seeing. I'm curious to know your thoughts on Web3.
So I have been reading about blockchain for quite some time. I'm not really an expert on that. Neither have I worked on it. I think I'm more of like a curious reader who's curious about NFTs, who's curious about cryptocurrencies, who's curious about blockchain. Probably one of the things that really concerns me, or I have not really been able to wrap my head around, is who is really governing it, right? Like we say that, okay, it's all the people on the blockchain, it's all the users, but it's still very difficult to understand if there is no centralization, because no centralization can also mean disadvantages. So it's sort of a balance that has to be made between centralization and decentralization. And that's some of the data storage or data warehousing techniques that I have known about, which sort of gets an amalgam of both centralization and decentralization. Where do you make the processes faster by decentralizing it, but at the same time, where do you really get into get-togethers, any kinds of standard practices and governance part, so that it's centralized and can be accountable for. So I believe it has to be a hybrid approach, which I do not see in blockchain yet. So I'm still curious to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think when we were discussing kind of Web3 and the evolution of it was more a search engine and a web platform that is decentralized and democratized for the user. And I think you've made a really excellent point, which is that actually the large corporations that are the leading corporations and the most commonly used at the moment are the ones that do work with regulations, and they have a really strict governance. And that strict governance probably also could be seen as something that would slow you guys down at some points.
Yeah.
But at least you know that you're doing things in the correct manner.
Yeah. If you don't have governance, then there's no end to what could be done, right? Like if you really don't have those guardrails, then you're just signing up for failure. So that's my belief around governance. Yes, it slows you down, but it also provides you with guardrails to avoid any major kinds of fallbacks.
So for the SMEs, the small and medium business owners that are watching this, that are looking to incorporate more tech and maybe more data security into their organizations, what are some of the kind of small bullet point takeaway points that you could give them today that are nice action points that isn't going to cost an arm and a leg for them, but is something which is pretty critical if they're looking to ride the wave of the next digital era?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by telling you something that I started researching about data science as a service probably like 5 years ago. And at that point, I wasn't sure how cloud computing is going to evolve. I do believe cloud computing, the way they have structured infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service is incredible, because that lets organization not become a engineering company by themselves. They can still be their own industry and still use the capabilities of the technology. So that's where cloud is a major, major plus. And with the recent advent of how we're using data science as a service, in the sense that all the cloud providers are giving you the toolkits, are giving you the ability to build your own data science models, are giving you the ability to build your own pipelines in the way that you want without having to know everything in and out as an engineer. So I believe that's going to be the easiest and the most cost efficient and the more structured manner that any small and medium business can look into as a first step, instead of building their own in-house data science team.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to jump into the people that are watching that have been inspired by you and your background. Looking at your LinkedIn, I was like, wow, this woman does not stop. It seems like so previous roles include IBM, currently in Google. I would love to hear a little bit more about your background and how you've got to where you are today in a pretty revolutionary field.
So I would say that I have been lucky through the beginning of my journey because my mother was into statistics. She was into data analytics before the cool buzzwords of machine learning or AI ever came into picture. So she used to do things in a more mathematical fashion. And I got introduced to that pretty early on because, yeah, my mom was very, very passionate about her career, and I got to learn a lot from her. While I was in school, I realized I was good at programming, I was good at math, so I felt, oh, this seems to be a good career path for me. While I was doing my undergrad, I realized that is exactly what I wanted to do because I realized it wasn't something it was not just my passion, but I felt my ability and skills were really, really aligned to data science as a field. As in when I got the right kind of opportunities to work with internships and like companies in different ways and like different capacities, I realized that's where I'm like headed to. That's when I came to the US to do my master's in data science. And yeah, like after which I worked for about 3 years at IBM, and now I'm at Google.
And you've said internships there, and I think for a lot of the leading minds in tech, when I speak to them and say, how do you guys get to where you have? Internships is kind of like the secret sauce actually for getting your foot in the door with some of these large multi-billion-dollar companies and seeing how they operate, making a good impression. And now there's also kind of the debate of actually which path is right for the new learner. And I know for data science, you mentioned going to get your master's in the US, but for people that are just looking to learn a little bit more about tech, would you say that internships could possibly be the way forward more so than a standard education process?
I would say yes, it's a step one, but then there is a step 0 of self-learning. And a lot of people ask me that, hey, how did you manage to get these internships and like all these, large tech companies? And what I keep telling them is that it wasn't one day that they just reached out to me or I just reached out to them and it just magically worked. It was because of all the portfolio projects that I had created before even approaching them for an internship. It was all the self-learning that I had already done. It was all the projects which I already had on my profile, all the exploration that I'd done. And that actually fed in as proof of my interest, proof of my skill, and that's why I got those internships in the first place. I think that's very important, that companies are not going to give you an internship if you know nothing about a field, right? Like they need some kind of background evidence or something that to understand that you're good, you're interested, and you're in a position to learn more about that particular field. So I think that's the first step before getting into thinking about internships, is to do the self-learning and then probably approaching companies for internships.
Totally agree. And I think something remarkable about this space is actually anyone that has a computer and to some extent a mobile phone can kind of dive into the world of tech, which is one of the reasons why I'm so infatuated by this industry. I think it's really, really awesome. Yeah. How is it working at Google? So how is because we see some videos on the internet and TikTok, it's like a day in the life of someone that works in Google. The offices look awesome. Yeah. How is that experience and what are some of the kind of interesting takeaway points that you've had?
So I would say it's amazing to work at Google. People are very, very collaborative. People are really, really smart. There is one positive, aka negative side to it, in the sense that the work environment can be stressful. I take it as it's very positively stressful because everybody is super smart. And you see everyone doing like such amazing things. You see people not just doing 100% on their work, but doing 300% on their work, much more than what's expected, because that's what really feeds their curiosity. That's what really feeds their creative brains. And that's a constant stress, but I take it as a positive stress because that also like pushes me to do better, pushes me to learn more. So that's what I have been experiencing for the past 8 months that I've been at Google. And yeah, I just feel the team is extremely collaborative. There is unlimited amount of opportunities within Google. So I don't have to limit myself to just the kind of work my team is doing. Google has been doing like things all across the like it's just everywhere. Like the span is crazy. So if I'm interested in something, I can definitely pick it up as a extra project. So we have this thing called 20% project, which is 20% of my time during the week I spend on my extra project, which is of my interest. So those are some things that you can explore, and I feel that's a great opportunity for you to do something that you're really, really passionate about and might or might not get to explore that as part of your job.
And that's really interesting, because for a lot of the startups that will be watching this as well, they're constantly looking for ways to be more productive. And I think you can sometimes, if you're about to launch a product or something's coming up, run yourself and the team into the ground. And I think that's a really interesting way to keep people enthusiastic, keep people motivated. So out of interest, what is your 20% interest project at the moment? Are you allowed to share?
Right now, I think I'm still focusing a lot more on my job role. So my 20% is still an initiative within the team. I have not really gone to any outside team yet. So my initiative is still within the team. I've been working on data quality assessment. So again, the data-centric AI that I spoke about, that is my initiative. So that's my baby, and I'm just keenly working on it to make sure that it becomes a standard practice throughout the Google Cloud AI team. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now.
So if I had a crystal ball here and I said, if you could look into the future and you had your way of how the data governance and what you're working on was implemented in 5 to 10 years, how would that look for us, the users?
I feel the technology that we're using right now would change a lot, and that sort of is difficult to really predict on how it would move. But the way I see it is we'll be more conscious on the kind of services that we are building. We'll be more conscious about who's going to be the user. Are we really creating a service that is more inclusive? Are we really creating something that only like caters to a particular kind of audience, or is it a global service, etc.? So I think it's going to be more cognitive. It's going to be more inclusive in the sense that who's going to be on the table to really build these solutions, and it's going to be more sustainable. It's going to be more robust. So we'll see less of these data breaches. Hopefully we'll see less of the data breaches. We'll see less of the situations where we say that, hey, the models are biased, hey, it's actually impacting humans in an ill manner, etc. So that's where I see the future is going to look like.
Amazing. And I want to do a full circle back to, I mentioned at the beginning, one of the LinkedIn top voices for AI and big data. And when I was looking at your profile, I think one of the most interesting things that stood out for me was really encouraging young boys and girls to get into STEM and to really dive into these different career paths, which didn't exist 20 years ago, and something that generationally our parents might not typically push us into. So for people that are watching, what would you say to encourage them to maybe persuade their daughters, their sons to get involved, and also just be a little bit more tech curious as we are making this move into something being so tech centric?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great question. So I've been trying to do this primarily because I feel the only reason I have been doing well in my career is because of the mentors I've had throughout my career. And that's my way of giving back to the community. That's why I started my own nonprofit organization called Illuminate AI, through which I'm trying to support people to give them mentorship for people who want to get into the AI space. And with AI, I really do not think it only means software engineering. It doesn't only mean being a data scientist. There is so many different aspects to AI, and that's where I feel every organization who's remotely digital, unless and until they are still using ledger books, who are remotely digital, are going to be using some form of AI or the other. It has to be in automation, it could be in virtual assistant, it could be there in some form or the other. So I feel like when we are looking at the future and saying that, hey, the young boys and girls are looking to get into STEM, they are going to be exposed to that in some form or the other. And that's why I feel it's very important that from a very young age, you need to understand what's the technology look like, what's the look and feel of it, and how does it really operate, because you're going to be having this day in, day out throughout your life. So it's very important that you understand what you're using, what's in your hand.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. It was an absolute pleasure to catch up. I know we'll be syncing again in the near future because it was just really fascinating to dive in. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jess. Have a good one.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you do want to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any more content like this, please make sure to do so.